active registration in October of last year. January of this year, I was awarded that contract, to a $250,000 contract. Multiple year option, which has potential for $1.5 million. I get a phone call. I'm looking at it, it's the U.S. government, and they're asking me, hey, would you be interested in bidding on this contract? I was in shock. I said, absolutely. It was a space that I was not familiar with. I started that and I dropped it. I said, well, you know what? Maybe this is not for me. I just wish I would have started sooner.
All amazing GovCon winners. I have Tim Hunt with CPS to talk to you about how he was just recently awarded in January of 2023 his very first contract with the federal government. And you're going to love this because we both are going to show you that you too can do this. So Tim, welcome to the channel.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Parks. What an honor. Thank you.
Oh, it's such an honor to have you here because, I saw some information about you. I saw this message and I was like, oh my gosh, you have a contract with Indian Health Services. And I'm like, I don't personally know anyone who's had any contracts with them. And then on top of it, you're talking about how you're new to this space. You're looking in the 8A. So you got to take us all back. Like, what do you offer and how did you get into this space?
Yeah, absolutely. By trade, a certified podorthist. And what that is, some folks have never heard of a podorthist. I'm an allied health clinician, and our focus is to work with individuals, mainly those who are diabetic, but anyone that has any issues from the ankle and below. So we provide whether it's orthopedic shoes, custom foot orthotics, and even bracing. And I've been in this space for over 20 years. This was before I started turning gray and all that. So I'm kind of one of the old clinicians in my field of practice. But this has been a wonderful and rewarding field of work for me. And my mentor, he worked for the tribal executive group there, actually for the Creek Nation. And he advised that I get into this field, 20 years ago. And my main practice of focus, rather, is with patients with diabetes. And we know how important it is to care for those who are diabetic. And diabetes has been on the rise for many years. So I thought it would be, very important that I go into this field and just help to try to curb some of those issues when it comes to amputations, foot deformities, just things of that nature. So I started out working for various companies over the years in this space. And as I got more experience, I started working with IHS for various companies. And IHS in Oklahoma is very large. We have all civilized tribes are here in Oklahoma. So I've been very fortunate to have a lot of experience working with but a number of tribal groups here in the state. And the previous company that I worked for the last 5 years introduced me to this government contracting space when it comes to working with IHS. And I have very, very strong relationships with IHS. The rest is history.
Well, I love that because you took an area that you've been in and you got paid to learn. This is one of the best ways to learn is taking a step to work for a government contractor, or in your situation, hey, who knows if they were in government contracting or not, but you actually learned while you're working with them. So I think that's just tremendous. And talk to us about what were the things that you learned and what were your thoughts when you're Indian Health Services and the government buys these things?
Absolutely. So great point. I wanted to stay in my lane. I was very good at what I've done and what I'm doing currently. And I wanted to be able to, utilize my skill and also eventually develop a business. And I've always had my own business on the side. But here back in May of 22, me and the previous companies decided to part ways. And I still had a pretty decent book of business at that time. And I was working through my SAM's registration and all that, providing diabetic shoes and inserts for those tribal entities. And then I began to move in the space of, I'll take a gamble on this, this government contracting. We'll be honest, it was a risk. It was a risk. It was a space that I was not familiar with. As far as the back end, I was able to take care of patients. That was easy. That was easy work. Just dealing with contracts, all the jargon, dealing with the SAM's registration, which was very frustrating. I started that back in February of 22 and I dropped it. I said, well, you know what, maybe this is not for me. And I picked it back up when me and the company had parted ways. And then I was finally given my active registration in October of last year. So in January of this year, I was awarded that contract. But again, because I developed very strong relationships and they knew my work, they knew that I was able to do the job, but I didn't know if I was able to actually deal with this contract with all the, the paperwork and all, all the things that came with it. And because of you and others just tuning into your YouTube and just getting involved and just going through what I call YouTube University, has been extremely helpful for me. And with my experience, like I said, the work was very easy. I knew that I was able to over deliver. Because I had done it, in previous years. So I was very confident and I had enough faith in myself that I was able to do this job. And I'll tell you, it was kind of bittersweet how all this happened. It was on a Friday. I was actually going to my cousin's funeral and I was pulling up in the parking lot of the church. And I get a phone call. I'm looking at it. It's the U.S. government. I'm like, okay. This was divine connection, I'm telling you. This is how the Lord works. Yeah, he works in mysterious ways, I tell you. So I get this phone call from the government and they're asking me, hey, would you be interested in bidding on this contract? And I'm like, pause for a second, like I was in shock. I said, absolutely. So they said, hey, we'll get this information over to you. And granted, the contracting officer had already had, contact with IHS and they knew who I was and they knew that I was capable. But I had never bid on a government contract, had no clue how to bid on a government contract. But I knew my numbers. I knew that part of it. I knew how to do the work. I just didn't know all the back end stuff. So anyway, I get the contract Friday afternoon after I get out of, the service Monday morning. I'm submitting the contract and those documents, back to the contracting officer. A couple of weeks later, I was awarded the contract.
That is so fast. And I love what you said because they knew your work. That value add is so important when it comes to government contracting because otherwise, why would they want to work with any of us? No matter what you do, there has to be value there. And it's very clear that you're super passionate about what you do. And then it's also good too that you didn't just brush it off like, oh, is this a scam or who's this calling me? Because that comes up a lot. Like, how does the government contact you? Sometimes they call you, sometimes they email you, sometimes they do both. And you just always have to be prepared. So what happened after you got the contract?
I was kind of freaking out at first. I'm like, wow, now I got this big contract. It was close to $250,000 contract. But I knew
like, this is great. I'm like, what is this also?
I knew what it was going to take because I had, with the previous company, I'd already serviced this contract, but I was just servicing under the previous company. So I knew the entire layout of the contract when it came to working with the staff. So I'm like, wow. I had to get prepared right away. I had to get my team in place. We had to hit the ground running that following week after I was awarded the contract. Again, I provide diabetic shoes, diabetic inserts, foot orthotics, brace, and all that stuff. So they were kind of behind and they were like, hey, we need to get this done. We have patients that need to be seen. And are you up to the challenge? Yeah, absolutely. Let's go. I'm ready. So we began moving forward with the contract and, I had my processes in place. I had my vendors ready. So I was prepared. I was ready, to get this thing going. The only thing that I kind of ran into was some budgeting, a little bit of some funding issues when it came to that. Just wanted to make sure that I was prepared for a contract that size in the beginning. Like I said, it wasn't an issue with me doing the work. I just wanted to have a cushion and make sure that I had all processes in place and that I didn't make any mistakes. So it was very important. And I tell you what, this is August. I've been able to over deliver. Things are going extremely well. We're looking at a multiple year option, which has potential for $1.5 million. So,
oh my, I'm just like, whoa, I'm so blown away. I love this. This is just so perfect because your passion, you know it. And you're like, hey, I'm going to take this risk. And then of course, they're going to be comfortable because they know, like, and trust you, right? So you did all the right things. You over delivered. So then they're going to want to give you more work. And how did you handle, because I know people are already thinking like, how did you handle the money piece? Because it seems like these different, like the shoes and the inserts, do you have to pay for them up front? How does all of that work? Do they give you terms? Please answer our questions around that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the group that I work with, a very large brokerage when it comes to, they do not only shoes and inserts, they do a lot of things when it comes to prosthetics, artificial limbs, bracing. I can find just about any orthopedic shoe on the market. And they were able to extend those terms 45 to 60 days out. So they gave me really good terms. The only thing I ran into with the government, it took like 90 days just to receive that first payment. But I had already had previous contracts that I had already been working. And I'll tell you what, those contracts that I had previous, before I would gain this government contract, it was kind of strange because they start to, when you work with tribal entities in this space, which I have for many of years, a lot of it is grant funded. And if they run out of funding, then, hey, they have to back off of, those services. So that means, as a small business owner, hey, you have to back off. So you're not able to provide those services that those patients need, due to lack of funding. So what happened, those tribes kind of backed off, towards the end of last year, first of this year. So it kind of diminished some of that cash flow a little bit. But I knew, once I got this contract going, and then those other tribes got those renewal, those grants, things would, things would replenish. I tell you what, I was not prepared for just the weight. That financial piece dealing with, government contract. Gosh, it was a little frustrating because, I wasn't familiar with that. I was very familiar with the terms that I had prior, that I had worked for a number of years. This is my first time. So I would definitely, advise you, make sure that you have a healthy amount of cash flow. Be patient with the government because they are not in a rush, especially with IHS. They have several processes that they have to go through before payment is issued. Everything that I had was in place. My deposits, everything was set up. I had all my ducks in a row. The invoicing, that was one thing we had to work through, invoicing, to make sure the invoicing was correct and my I's were dotted and T's crossed. And there were some changes in between invoicing, so kind of delayed some of the payment. But once we got that fixed, things started to flow smoothly.
And that's really common, that it can take up to 90 days because there are people. It's not AI. It's not some robot. I think there's this misconception that you submit an invoice to the government and there's some robot or alien who's like processing the payment. And in reality, it's human beings that are involved in this process. So what if somebody's on vacation? Who knows? So just be prepared and be patient, as you suggested. I'm curious, which platform do they use for payment? Or do you email them?
Actually,
both.
Actually, it is email. There's a basic invoicing template. I email that to the director at the clinic, and then it goes through a couple of hands, and then it gets to the, acquisition management department. Then it goes to finance, and then.
And this is something for everyone to be aware of because every agency pays differently. And so this is where getting those processes into place play a role, because now you have to email a template. You're going to have to make sure you have your sent messages, you're following up, you have the right email, because everything is now dependent on an email opposed to IPP or wide area workflow. And also, as he said about the changes, you never know. A year from now, you may find out, oh, we're switching to IPP or they're switching to a new system. And then you have to completely follow that. And then when you make that change, anticipate there's going to be a bit of delay too.
Right. That's a good point. The good thing about my email is that my office is right across the hall from the director. So I can just walk across the hall and say, hey, any questions on the email, the invoice, so on and so forth. And I did speak to the acquisition director about IPP. So that's something that they will be looking at next year. But we're looking at, making sure that we get those processes in place. I think there was an email a few weeks ago, regarding that. So, but I did follow up with them on that. And he said, right, at this point, we're good. But next year, that's something, that they're looking at.
Explain to everyone, how is it that you have an office directly across from a director?
So I'm in the clinic. So I'm in the clinic twice a week in Indian Health Services. And I have been for the last 5 years. So again, I've developed some very, very strong relationships there. So when I go into the clinic, we're in a certain office space. And my office where I see patients is just directly across, from the director, and there's several nurses stations as well. So they wanted the patients to be seen in that location. So it makes it very, very convenient. If there's any questions, that may need to be asked, or if there's any concerns that need to be addressed, he's available. Or if we need to get a nurse in there, if a patient has an issue, we have access to a nurse if need be. We have audiology, we have, optometrists. So there's a number of things within that office space. I'd say, when I say it's divine appointment, it's divine appointment. This is something I prayed about and had faith about. And the Lord he just aligned it all up. I said, hey, if this is for me, you would give it to me. And that's what he did.
And he did. The other thing about this, when I first started out, I was physically in the same office as military members, government employees. And when you're set up in that situation, which by the way, he's not paying rent to be there, it's a government furnished office. The good thing is the relationship building. Now you're taking it to a next level because they saw him before he stepped into government contracting on his own. They're seeing him now as a government contractor. And then when you see someone every day, or even if it's twice a week, you're like, oh my goodness, where would we be without him? Where would we be without Tim? So then they want to give him more work. And it may turn into where Tim is now providing medical assistance for nurses, or he's providing a psychologist because you become the go-to. So they're like, well, you can do it all. You become like the Amazon in the medical space for healthcare. And so that's one of the benefits if one ever gets a contract where it requires some type of on-site long-term interaction, you really want to take advantage of that. So it's great that you have that. Definitely is. So like, what's next for you? Because I believe you were starting the 8A process.
Yeah, exactly. I know there's a hold on 8A, which is a bummer because they really encourage 8A, native-owned, woman-owned, minorities, so forth. So, especially working with IHS, they look at native-owned first and then 8A. So,
and that's something I didn't even ask. Are you considered native-owned?
I am not considered native-owned. Of course, we have family here in Oklahoma that they're native, but we don't have a CDIB. There's a role. So there's a lot of pieces that need to be placed together. So it's very important if you are working with the tribal entities in Oklahoma. If you're native owned, they look at that. That's a priority. The 8A, yeah, that's something that I've been working on. It's just a lot of information. And of course, they put it on hold because I was really pushing that because I knew how important that was, I feel like I received it set aside, in the beginning because they knew me, that whole process. So I felt, of course, I didn't need an 8A, at the time, but I started to partner with an 8A in the beginning. Things kind of, the bottom kind of fell out of that deal there. So I decided to go ahead and do it on my own because I had such a great relationship. And I'm one of the few clinicians that do this kind of work in my area. So the next one, it was probably maybe 60 miles away. Well, maybe I can kind of back off the 8A for a minute, and then obviously now it's been put on hold. So the next thing I've been working on, so I've also developed some very strong relationships with VA. So that's my next goal. I've had a conversation with a few individuals there a few weeks ago about working with the VA, becoming a vendor, and also developing some form of partnership with DOD. So there are some things that I'm looking at, that we're looking at as a company and partnering with some other companies to take this to the next level.
And are you considered an SDVOSB or a veteran-owned?
I am not.
Okay. I just was curious, and I don't know if you're looking for any partners or not. I just know one powerful tool as you progress is joint ventures, because in that way you both have ownership. Because while subcontracting is amazing, I started out as a subcontractor, they can do whatever it is they want to do. They're the prime. Then you got to take it to court if it goes that way. But when you have a joint venture, you both have ownership. But I think it's great because at the end of the day, it's not even so much about the set asides, it's about what you offer Tim. And that is superior because the know, like, and trust, and then you're offering something where just in your area, somebody's an hour away. They know that you're going to be able to deliver it. So that's super vital. For anyone who wants to contact you, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
They can contact me via email, timhunt@yahoo.com. I've had that email for a long time, so that's great. Very simple. My name, Oklahoma, all lowercase together. And they can also contact me via my website if they even have questions about, not only about GovCon, but if they have questions about their feet, about shoes, any of that, they can go to my website. It's www.cpsfoot.com. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that they may have because somebody helped me. You helped me and didn't know it. Many others have helped me, and I'm always willing to give a hand out and also a hand up, to help somebody. We're helpers of one another.
Yes, definitely the hand up. And would love for you to share what is something that you're like, man, I wish I knew this as you were going from responding to winning to executing your current contract that's going to end up being over $1 million.
I wish I would have started sooner. Because it was a mind thing. I was fearful. I knew it was possible that I was able to do the work. I really know it's really not that difficult. I mean, I have a team that supports me that the whole way through. I had mentors that I can go to, and I got good counsel from. I just wish I would have started sooner, and especially the financing piece. Is very important. Make sure that you have good cash flow. I think you work with Republic. There's different entities out there that make sure that you have those resources on hand, and just work to become a person of value. Don't worry about the success. Obviously, the money's going to come. To be totally honest, I wish I would have started sooner, but God's timing is perfect. It's impeccable. So I know that's a simplistic answer, but based on my experience with it, because I felt like I knew enough about it, I just didn't know all the back end stuff. But when I found out, put it all together, it's something. I'm like, man, I should have started. Should have just stepped out of the box. I was afraid to step out of the box because I didn't think I was capable as far as dealing with the back end stuff. Like I said, I knew the work. I was more than capable to do the work. Have faith in yourself, that you can do the work, and be persistent with it, and learn to persevere, because there's going to be difficult times that we go through, whether it's finances, whether it's sickness, whatever it may be. But we just got to keep our hands to the plow and keep moving forward.
Yeah, we definitely do. And I commend you for sharing that, because it can be uncomfortable. You're taking a risk. And then once you do it, you're just like, man, why didn't I do this so many years ago? But the good news is the government's always buying things. So there's always going to be a need. I'm pretty sure you've seen just an increase, especially with all the amazing preservatives and processed food we have out there. You've only seen an increase in what you offer, Tim. So it's not like, that's the beautiful thing. And I would say most of us out there, and for those of you who are viewing, the government is always going to have a need for something that you provide. And even if that need shifts, you offer something else. If there's a hot new foot insert, Tim's going to offer that. If there's a new shoe, Tim is going to offer that. That's what's so crazy, but also so beautiful about this space is they're always spending. Recession, they're spending. Even in a shutdown, they're spending. If there's a war, they're spending. Like there's peace, they're spending. I just really love this. And again, Tim, how can people reach out to you?
Via email, timhunt@yahoo.com, timhunt@yahoo. Again, you can go to my website at www.cpsfoot.com.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for being here and being such an inspiration, because you just demonstrate there's no reason you can't. Because if you don't try, then you're not going to get anything. And then you get 0% of nothing.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, anytime. And everyone, don't forget, like, subscribe, hit the notification button, and everything is possible.